Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Extra Hours on a Monday evening. This is part of the Office Hours Global network of shows that happen every day at 7 a.m. Pacific, and then we get the special time slot. It's special because we get to include more of the Southern Hemisphere in the show, and for the first time out of 13 weeks that we've been doing this, the first time we now outnumber the Northern Hemisphere people. So let's have a look at our panel. First of all, closest to me in Adelaide is Carl down there in Adelaide. Hello, Carl.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good morning. He said it to rub it in as well that it's still morning here.
That's all right.
Good work. Nice to have you back. We're going to be asking. Got to put your questions in. You can put some questions in to the Makana that we have there for people that are playing along at home, but you could just easily put it into askofficehours.com and we can have a quick look at those as well to get some questions in. Carl he's a big space nerd. I mean, can I just say a nerd in general?
Yes.
Because really there's not many topics.
I carry many
that
nerd cards in my wallet.
Yeah, there you go. So there's quite a lot of anything that's trivia based, as we've learned a couple of times. There's not too many trivia questions that Carl can't answer. So have a think of some questions there. But I'm going to ask you about Starlink and things in a little bit, Carl. We're going to come. So we'll keep going Southern Hemisphere. We've got Ryan Summerfield just outside of Sydney. Thanking Starlink actually too, right?
Yes, I'm coming to you live from Starlink. G'day, Grant. G'day all.
It's good to have you back, Ryan. Ryan's been on a couple of times, but we've heard some cinematography kind of background. There's some actually spider cam as well usage there as well. We were talking about that on one of the episodes that you weren't here. So I've got to rewind my brain and think about those questions that we had around spider cam, and so we'll come to that. And then across the ditch in New Zealand, we have Adrian Watkins. Hello, Adrian.
Kia ora, Grant. Good afternoon, all. It's just turned afternoon down this end of the world.
Right. Yes, we're covering the full day, morning, afternoon, and evening. And so, Adrian, a bunch of sort of on the edge of broadcast with lots of IT sort of side, right? Like a IT infrastructure that working in the broadcast industry. That's sort of your bag.
Yeah, that's the one. From many years ago, putting in radio stations and attempting to do a audio over IP at the time and finding how easy it is now compared, and photography and lots of IT. So yeah, quite a broad background and radio. So.
Nice. There you go. So there's three of us in the Southern Hemisphere, and let's spin all the way up to the top of America in Washington State. In Seattle is Guy Cochran. Hello, Guy.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little outnumbered, and I'm checking my wallet for my nerd card. I'm feeling like I'm uncredentialed here. I need one of those. Where do you sign up for one of those there, Carl?
I think
So
successful.
Blockbuster. You have to go back in time, go to Blockbuster, and they'll give you.
Get you a nerd card. I think you could have the successful retail businessman nerd card. You could have that in your pocket.
Does that come with a propeller hat?
Yeah.
Where I could spin that puppy around?
And a pocket protector.
Double duty.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool.
And so, so hang on. Oh, that's it.
It's everyone.
Have I forgotten? There we go. Yeah. So I was thinking that we had a couple of people. Alex couldn't make it last minute. So it's good. I told my I told my 9-year-old a while ago about when the cat's away, the mice will play, and any time that my other two children and my wife go out and it's just me and Harry left in the house, as soon as the door closes, he says, "The mice are here." So That's how I feel now that Alex isn't here. The cat's away, so the mice will play. So let's see what comes up. I did want to check in on the chat. See that
we could talk all the TriCaster we want, then, right? I mean,
that's right. Yeah, this is going to be a show about PCs. We're going to talk all about Windows and Android devices. So what we've got. Dave and Tex. Oh, Tex is another Sydney sider, and Henry and Craig. Yeah, there's a few people in the chat. We keep an eye on that as well, and so and we've got a couple of questions that come in. We can probably knock these questions off, Guy. What's the first one there for Paul?
Got one in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and he says Canva raises prices for subscriptions. Teams plans from $120 per year to $500, a 300% increase. AI strikes again? ? And he's got a link there to a Verge article.
Adrian?
One day I'll get a hardware mute set up on this thing. It's partially IA, but it's probably also the fact that Canva's brought Serif Group, so the Affinity products, Affinity Designer, Affinity Publisher, Affinity Photo, and they're making them freely available to not-for-profits and education institutes. So there's probably got to have to cover that in some way. But the commercial reality of a software business these days is that unless you're doing it by subscription, there's no value there for you because you've got to put a lot of effort into doing the upgrades and doing the support, and you've got to have something meaningful for people to want to rebuy the product. So whilst I hate it, and I very much like the Black Magic approach, it's the commercial reality these days.
Yeah. I think that there's. I was just looking at the once Australian pricing, 165 for an individual. Still, I think that's still the same. It was just that the teams went up to a minimum of 3, is what I was seeing, which is a fair jump. But Carl, what's your take?
So I think it's them licensing AI from a third party. There's an AI person, and because they're doing generative stuff. So essentially, this is where Canva, they had a lot of templates. They had a lot of humans making templates for Canva. So I think now they're licensing AI to do this generative stuff as well, on top of human curated stuff. So I think that's if there's a price increase for certain plans, it's the one that would include AI generative, templates, which is actually, it's a good thing, to be honest, because it gives more variety in the corporate space. You don't have to see the same, boring background for every slide. So it's not bad, but yeah, so these prices will increase until competition comes in and they'll drive them down again. So it's just a cycle.
Okay, next question.
Next one's coming in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and he asks, what are the challenges for videography in space in terms of lighting and sound? And he's got a link to a YouTube video.
Ryan?
Look, I'd love to be up there to deal with said challenges. I'm happy to put my hand up to film and light it and that kind of thing. The video they're showing is the recent spacewalk with the first commercial spacewalk. That would be absolutely incredible. But look, in terms of lighting, dynamic range is definitely a huge part of this. When we've got such bright lights from the sun and the shadows as well. So I think they intentionally actually angled the ship so the bottom was actually towards the sun to help with cooling and things like that. So being able to actually expose the person there and get the sky in there is actually pretty impressive. So look, it's certainly not easy, and the lighting in there is it's quite nice for a spaceship. It's very modern now, but having the lights bouncing off there it's definitely a bit overexposed for when you're actually looking at it, but it's giving a nice soft light for the astronauts in there. But yeah, I look forward to, I don't know, maybe eventually jumping on one of these. That'd be fun if it becomes affordable enough.
Yeah, I think I want to give extra props to Paul because I think he's trying to use as many of Carl's nerd cards as he can. He's speaking about cameras, which Carl is a photographer, professional photographer, and also so that's one of his nerd cards, and then the other nerd card is the space one. And so the problem's going to be stopping Carl talking about all of this. But have a go, Carl.
So I'll talk about the Sarah Gillis playing violin. So that was a record. It wasn't live. It was shot. The primary camera was shot on an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, one of the two. And there was a secondary angle which was from the iPad. So they all have iPads on their legs. So that's actually kind of like their notepad, their flight book. So they actually have, of course, there's a camera, a 12, 4K camera on the iPad as well. So there was two shots. And the lighting in the capsule can be changed. So they can sit on the monitors, change the lighting for direction. So you can actually light up a quarter of it, half of it, which they don't. They just light it up completely. And it does get quite bright. They can get it quite bright because they have to counteract the bright sunlight outside. So the capsule does actually, it has a night mode, of course. They can go when they want to sleep, of course, but like an airplane. As far as audio, if you actually watch a video of Sarah playing the violin, you'll notice that the microphone, which is a clip-on instrument microphone, is probably only about 2 centimeters away, 1 inch away from the bridge of the violin, which means it gets rid of all the other spacecraft noise from the life support systems and all that. So that stuff just you won't even pick that up because she's so close to the bridge of the violin that the noise the violin's making is going to be quite loud anyway in that space. Acoustics is not going to be too much of a problem because again you need actually room mics to hear acoustics, and so she has more of a direct mic. So this is what we do when live. So if we have a violin in a live setting, in a concert, not necessarily in a concert hall, but like in a live setting, like outdoor concert, orchestra and stuff like that, they'll have what they call close miking or instrument miking. So it essentially allows the person who mixes later on to do it. She was recording just into GarageBand on an iPhone, so straight into an iPhone, just recording on GarageBand, pretty straightforward. So as far as the audio, it's just a contact. Well, it's actually not a contact mic, but it's a close mic to the bridge. The lighting, the iPhone, it has no problem. I think with all the LED lights on in the spacecraft, the iPhone has no problem, especially the main camera. And any audio or acoustics, yes, it is a kind of a dome shape in there. But the thing is, what you don't see in those shots is the other 3 people taking up an enormous amount of volume in there, and they are made of water, so they would absorb any kind of weird standing waves that you may get. You wouldn't get many standing waves anyway because there's no flat edges in that space. The chairs and the humans would break it up. So it'd actually be quite a cool space to record in. The only problem is the life support system is always on. So you're always going to hear that if you have like room mics.
Does zero gravity make any difference to the sound?
No. So it's pressure inside the spacecraft would, but the pressure inside their spacecraft, because this is an interesting thing. I believe they did that recording like right at the beginning of the mission. Okay. The reason why is because they were going to go into like 100% oxygen. And so they just didn't know what was going to happen to the violin in that scenario. So when they launched, because, they get in the capsule, they close the door. So therefore the air inside the capsule when they launch is exactly the same as the air outside. So it is standard to atmospheric pressure and atmospheric concentration of gases, so nitrogen and oxygen. After the first day, so about 24 hours in, they did start to change to 100% oxygen because they had to get ready for the spacewalk on day 2. So I believe the violin playing was done on day 1 before they changed the atmosphere of the capsule. And then they changed the atmosphere of the capsule, and then they went and did their spacewalk, and then came back in, and they changed the atmosphere of the capsule again, and then did all the experiments under. So there is a profile of the atmosphere that they were breathing, but that was like one of the first things they did when they got to space was playing the violin, recording that piece of violin. So it could be sent down, edited, well, not really edited, but mainly mixed with all the live orchestras that were playing around the world at, pretty much a day later. They were planned. It was meant to coincide with the spacewalk. So spacewalk was going to be essentially 24 hours after that recording. So, but no, the atmosphere inside. Now, if we're talking like Apollo was different. So Apollo was a 5 psi pure oxygen. So that would have a difference.
Apollo was in a studio, right? So,
but that was Stanley Kubrick in a studio, of course. Yeah.
That's right. So that was so that was fine.
Different regardless.
Yeah, exactly. A friend of Office Hours, Dr. Vienna Tran, is another space nerd massively. And doesn't she also play violin?
Yes, so she can play violin and viola. I think viola's her primary, but violin would be like a secondary. Yeah,
So she must be like, this is amazing. This is like all of her interests all converging.
that's right.
She'll be able to do the same thing as well as look after them medically.
That's right.
All right. Next question.
Got one in from Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York, and he asks, is the TD using a control surface for the TriCaster switching the show today? If so, which?
No. So Taylor's looking after it all here. And he's I believe he's using a mouse and keyboard and clicking through. So that's a thumbs up. Yep. Yeah. So it's an instance that's running on AWS and is being controlled through Parsec, using Parsec this time, or there's a couple of different things that are being used to share the screen and control, keyboard control. What have you got going?
How about one of these things?
Yeah.
I'm just using this one
X-Keys?
for vMix, but yeah, it's an X-Keys 128 with the T-bar, and with central control, you could map these to the various different software switchers. So central control with a VPN, you can cut, preview program, and then make these buttons do whatever you want. So if you have super sources that you want, you could program those, playback, whatever you want them to be, stream, record, those kind of things. This one's like, I want to say it's $700-800, and then for Taylor's, I mean, gosh, in an ideal situation, you'd probably have one of the larger panels that would probably be in the $5,000-6,000 range.
Yeah, the large panel. So that, yeah. Yeah, you can use all sorts, and because you can pass USB data through that tunnel as well, so that you could actually, it's an easy way to make that work. Guy, have you got a Blackmagic control surface at all? Or
I've owned them, but I don't have one currently.
Yeah. I have a need. I've got one. You can see it's actually flashing there at the moment. And I do have a need to connect that remotely to a switcher. And I was thinking about that. There's a few different ways. Obviously, a VPN is one way to do it, but I was thinking about potentially just doing some port forwarding and see if I could make it work over the WAN. Just try that, but I'm not sure how many ports it might use, if it'll allow that or not. But that's something that I'm playing around with.
I haven't done that. I know that Alex has, when we had Nate Hill do Mad in the Kitchen, he was using his panel at his remote facility to control our constellation. So yeah, I'm sure it's not that hard of a lift.
No, and that was probably VPN, sort of site to site, which I could do. But it's a matter of managing. Ideally, it's managing that into VLANs as well, and so that then you've just got certain things that are going through the VLAN and through the VPN, and everything else not, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so there's not a whole bunch of weird traffic hitting at the same time that can cause some kind of delay, especially on a cut. Because, yeah, in that other show that you and I used to do, I used to sit there just, ready to hit that Stream Deck button to hit that plan, and it had to be a perfect, like within, a half second of firing that thing off. It was always nerve-wracking to go like, please don't double punch, please don't double punch, please don't double punch, and go. Yeah, that was a cool setup though.
Yeah. In theory, it's doable. I mean, right now, I've got a tunnel through to my office. So I'm going through Starlink to my office, and this is pulling up the constellation in the office at the moment. So
that's cool.
In theory, I just typed in the IP address of the switcher and just pipe right through. So in theory, it'll work. Just, as long as you got that VPN tunnel going, it should just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a few people that have done it. I was just trying to think of the most efficient way of doing it, and that's why I'm thinking about the VLAN option of kind of just one VLAN is seeing the VPN as a, and if I can do that in, ideally, if I could do it through I think similar to you, Guy, I've got the Ubiquiti as my main network, but but then I've got a Peplink that's actually my main router, And so if I could do it through the Ubiquiti and make the VPN connection through that on a VLAN, and then just have just the switcher sitting on that VLAN, and then point it to the right IP address, it should work great. So, we'll see. I want to play around with that idea. And then doing some multi-views just over Zoom.
Have you done any of that site-to-site, that Site Magic Ubiquiti stuff? Have you seen any of that?
No,
I was on with a gentleman that does curling, the sport curling, and he's got multiple centers, and he said all he's shipping out is just that little $119 Ubiquiti cloud device, Express or something like that.
Express, yeah.
Cloud Express, yeah. And then he uses site-to-site manager to just put them on the network, and then he uses NDI Bridge. I was shocked that he was just using NDI Bridge like that to control the PTZ cameras and give people access through groups. So it's interesting what people are doing these days with these fast networks.
That's right. If you have a Ubiquiti at both ends and you know how to set them up for site to site, which it goes through in the manual how to set it up, then you're only at the limit of the threshold of the data rate. But if you're only doing control, you don't need much data rate anyway.
No.
Yes, I'm
and he
using
was
site
just
to site at the
using
moment.
Bridge.
Oh,
you are?
Yeah, so, and it's actually been great because I don't have a static IP here. I'm able to do a port forward from, thanks, Apple. Do a port forward from my office to here, and it'll just go straight through. So I essentially have a public IP without having one. And it was literally one click. So bang, popped up, off it goes.
That's great. That's very cool. Okay. I might be spending some more money. Nice work. All right, next question.
All right, next one's coming in from Dave Kaufman in Vancouver, BC, and he asks, any thoughts about the tiny new DJI Neo for in-room streaming? With covered props, it's safer and maybe quiet enough for far-away wide shots.
Carl?
Yeah, so at 135 grams, so that's pretty light. So you'd be okay flying that over, pretty much an audience at a concert. But it comes with the same AI tracking that was found, I believe, in the Mini 4 and maybe in the Mavic Pro 3. So essentially you can have like a lead singer on stage, and then this thing can do a dolly shot from stage left, pretty much from, let's say row 5, and go all the way from the left to the right, and it will track the lead singer like you're doing a dolly shot, laterally right across that space. So if you're in like, it's quite amazing what you could do, even if you've got like that space where you may have a dolly track in front of the stage, and that you're always looking up because you don't want to get in way of the audience. With this being tiny, you can actually get eye level shots now and do dolly shots at eye level in that kind of safe zone between the stage and the front row. So essentially, if it does fall out of the sky at 135 grams, it's not going to be too bad. But if you're going fast, you may want to go fast. But now you can do these dolly shots because it has the same AI tracking from pretty much 18 months ago, which is really cool. So you're actually getting something that was in like a $2,000 drone. And it's just got to do something very basic. Like, as I said, like a good example would be at a concert, lead singer is on stage, dead center of the stage, and you do this kind of dolly shot across the lateral surface of the stage and follow them. And in the background, of course, are all the other members of the band. So this is a way to show all the members of the band, but be on the lead singer at eye level, because that's one of the hard things to do from a dolly shot. If you're lower down, you're looking up at the lead singer, but you can't really see the drummer because the camera angle's pretty much too low unless they're on a riser that's 5 meters tall. So there are some really cool angle shots you can get from certain live shows now. You could do this with the Mini or the it depends on, like, you could have already done this, but this makes it a bit of a no-brainer for $200 to chuck this into a concert and get it at eye level and start getting some eye level photographs too. Because remember, these things have pretty high resolution. They essentially have the same sensor that's in the iPhone. So you can actually get some high quality photographs from a live show rather than doing it from rehearsals. Again, because the reason why is because you're going to be really in the way of the audience if you position yourself in the perfect spot to get a good shot of them on stage from the audience point of view. And you can get photographs of, above the audience, you can get shots, So it's actually going to be quite amazing that if bands actually just have a person, their PR person, learn how to use this and safely, they can get some pretty amazing promotional shots.
Does that camera have the Crystal Sky, the HDMI out capability so that you can?
I don't know, because you have to use the Pro controller to do that. So it depends whether the Pro controller works with this particular one. And this is where I believe the Mini, as far as I'm aware, the Mini is the cheapest one that works with the Pro controller. So this one, I believe, has its own unique controller. So it depends that's what I mean. If you want to do live, if you want to do records, it's one thing. This is a bit of a no-brainer for records and promotional photography from different angles for like a band. I'm talking from perspective of a band. You can put this into a wedding because it's so small. You can actually get good wedding shots, like of all the guests. Essentially like a crane shot from the back of the wedding. You wouldn't really want to fly up to them, but essentially if you're on the periphery of where the audience are for a wedding ceremony, you can get some pretty good shots, and they won't hear it. They generally won't hear it if you're in like a house of worship, or especially if you're outside, you're not going to hear it, of course. But you can actually fly around quite easily, being on the periphery and not a problem to get those kind of shots. So there is a lot of interesting stuff for $200 US. It's quite interesting, I have to admit.
There's plenty of fail army that are full of drone shots that have gone bad. Thinking of a bride and groom standing on the a cliff face or whatever, and the drone smacking the bride in the face. It's not a good way to get paid.
No, but 135 grams is a little bit less.
It is.
Than
it is
250.
a bit better, and the props being covered as well is a good thing too. What's that cut on your face? All right, next question.
Next one's coming in from me in Seattle, Washington. With the pro photographers in the panel, what do you think of the larger sensor cameras like the Fuji GFX line compared to popular mirrorless cameras from Canon, Sony, Nikon, etc.?
Adrian?
Well, in general, the bigger the sensor, the better the image. But you've got significantly larger file formats to cope with. Lower noise, lower in your ISO, so you can probably get away with less light. I remember when Hasselblad came out with one of their first digital offerings, they had tried to cram so many pixels on a chip that they couldn't get a full wavelength of red light through it. So you've also got to look at the size of the pixels on the sensor and make sure that they're a decent size rather than just having a big sensor as well. What's your thoughts,
Carl?
So, buckle in, everyone. So, as a full-time photographer,
the nerd card.
So, large format, or medium format digital cameras, which there's two flavors essentially. So we've got the Fuji, which we call like the crop version of medium format, and then you've got your Hasselblad and your Phase 1. So Phase 1 is pretty much at the top. So all the sensors in all these cameras are made by Sony. In fact, the sensor that's in the Phase 1 vanilla version, there are there's a black and white version and a trichromatic version, but I won't get into those. But the 150 megapixel sensor that's currently in the IQ4 back for the Phase 1 is the exact same sensor, just a crop version of it, that's in the Fuji cameras. Now the ISP is different, so the electronics, that's taking that image and doing all the ISP stuff to it. It's completely different. That's what you're paying for. But Sony makes all the sensors. It's just the standard backside illuminated sensor. Nothing too flash. What's more important about this is the color arrays. So this is actually where you go up in higher quality. Is the color filters up in front of each sensor are much higher quality. They're actually a little bit more dense. So your ISOs, base ISO is always 100. And these cameras are used. They're used by anyone really who can afford it. You get some rich dentists and lawyers that will buy them, of course. But commercial photography. And so commercial photography, they need extra area around whatever their subject is because they need to put words. They need to put their text for marketing around it. So this is something people forget. And this is why medium format was always used in fashion. Because yes, you're shooting the model for the front page of the magazine, but they want to use that model any stance, like, maybe a half shot or a full shot. They want choice later on, and they need to put words around that model. So there was no generative fill back in the day. So you had to shoot on such a large format to make sure you got all the background, everything else you needed for what's going around the model. So you can put your word Vogue and what's in that particular issue. So it comes from a legacy of that kind of thinking. It's still used today. So there's still, high-end advertisers who do photography and don't just do renders. Food is a big one. So we don't generally render food generally. Some drinks have started, like Coke and stuff have started doing renders rather than actual photography. But Cadbury is one that doesn't do renders. So Cadbury still photograph all their food for their marketing campaigns. And most people in them will be renting Phase 1s, renting Hasselblads. Some will own Fuji for that kind of work as well. But these are kind of like, Cadbury will get 6 shots out of the shoot, and the photographer will charge $20,000. So that's kind of the market we're talking about here. So when you hear like a Phase 1's $80,000, That's because they're making $20,000 per shoot. But that's a whole different word in that commercial photography. If you're doing like landscapes with this kind of stuff, which again, Phase One has a landscape camera, and you can use these kind of cameras, as I said, for anything, then your depth of field will be far less. So it gets really difficult for event photography. So if you've got a group of 3 people standing in front of you, only one of them is going to be in focus once you get to a larger sensor. It's very hard to get all of them in focus without having to stop down the lens like a long way and then adding an enormous amount of light yourself or cranking up the ISO and therefore losing the benefit of the large sensor. So there's plus and minuses for this. But one of the other things you can use it for is tilt shift. So tilt shift with a large sensor is very, very valuable, which is you can do tilt shift on a smaller sensor, but with a larger sensor with a technical, what we call a technical camera, so essentially the sensor is really just the back. The technical camera is going to be the lens and the bellows in between. You can do kind of what we call large format photography back in the day, 4x5, 8x10, and you can really get your plane of focus, that kind of stuff really in tune with what the job requires. Artistically what you require, but what the job requires. Again, if you're shooting a product that's on a table, but the client wants everything to be in focus on the table, then you'll have to use a tilt shift lens or focus stacking. Focus stacking comes with its own plus and minuses. Tilt shift comes with its own plus and minuses because there's a distortion, of course, that you have to correct later on. So, but large format cameras are very flexible. They're very slow to use generally. The Fuji one's a little bit faster because they act like a mirrorless camera, but they are going to be slower than like a Canon, a Nikon, or a Sony for like event photography, like if you're doing weddings and stuff. But if you're the type of photographer that's okay taking a bit slow and you are more structured anyway, those cameras are good. But whether your client needs that because the photo's going on Facebook anyway at 4 megapixel, then that's a whole other thing. But generally the lenses for them are higher quality. They don't have budget lenses for those kind of cameras generally. So you are looking at like, $4,000 or $5,000 per lens, regardless of what the lens is. And of course with Phase One, you're looking at, $10,000 to $20,000 per lens. So, but yeah, but we're in a world here of commercial photography with big dollars for marketing, but it's just art directors asking for certain things. So it is different to mirrorless from Sony, Canon, Nikon, and the like. But they're even smaller cameras, I'd say the iPhone included, they will have their place. So you wouldn't want a really large format sensor going up on Dragon spacecraft to shoot a violin. So this is kind of where it all pans out, like the right tool for the right job. And some jobs benefit from having a large sensor and benefit from having lenses that can resolve, up to 150 megapixel.
Wow. Ryan, is there anything left to say?
Can't say it. Just show them the iPhone. Isn't that what it's for? Are you actually looking to get one, Guy, or are you just more looking for a general thought about it?
It's one of those things where I love pristine images, and I was just at our local camera store and walked by the case, and I had asked the guys at Fuji to load me a GFX 50 when it first came out, and it was at NAB. So I said, hey, like I knew the guy, well, barely. I knew him for 30 minutes. I said, hey, look, here's my wallet. Let me take this camera and a good lens and go walk around the floor. And so I did. I went and shot a couple shots out of an SD card, and those images, when I brought them back home and started playing with them in Photoshop with the raw format, and just the clarity of them is so stunning. And now that was a couple of years ago, so the price of that camera was 10,000, or the 100 was 10 grand, 9,995, and now those things are going used because of the GFX 100 II. So people are starting to use those for video, and have been even with the original version. So I'm just sitting here watching the used market, and I'm in a couple of Facebook groups, and I'm seeing the images, and I'm just like, wow. But yeah, it's a patience thing, because some people will say like, hey, I bought into this system, and then I went back to my Sony because I shoot weddings and I needed the speed. I needed to be fast, and I needed 2 cameras, and I wanted one wide, one telephoto. So the GFX was the wrong camera for the job. But for commercial, I could see it. And that's why I wanted to get Carl's or anybody's opinions just as to what people were thinking of these cameras. Because yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Another thing is the pixel pitch. So, the adage is you get a larger sensor, you get larger pixels. Not true in this case because we're talking 100 megapixels, 150 megapixels. So the Sony sensor that they make, now there's the base Sony sensor, which is kind of the photodiode side, and then there's what we call the stacked part. So the stacked part is actually usually bespoke to whichever camera it's going into. These ones, I believe, aren't stacked though at the moment. So the sensor that goes into this, so essentially the photosensitive part is the exact same sensor that goes into the Blackmagic 4K. So it's the exact same wafer. So that 12-inch wafer, Depending on how they cut it up differently, of course, for the 4K Blackmagic, but it's the exact same sensor that goes in 4K Blackmagic that goes into the Phase 1, the Hasselblad, and the Fuji's 100 megapixel version. The 50 megapixel version is a little bit different. But so if for those playing at home, so understand that your Blackmagic camera, the 4K version, one that came out in 2018, and I believe also the same as the Micro Studio G2, those two sensors they're identical, and the 4K Studio versions, of course. They all have the same sensor that's in a $80,000 Phase 1. So it's just the ISP in the background, the amount of pixels it can read off, of course, those things are different. And there's some other stuff that's different as far as how the ADD converter works, because of course Blackmagic does a 12-bit file that you get in the end, whereas Phase 1 will give you a 16-bit file. So that ADD conversion, that's by choice of the manufacturer how they choose to do that. But the same quality of pixels as far as light gathering, so when people say, oh, these pixels are better than these ones, they're exactly the same. Same noise as well.
So is that the same with the 17K camera that's coming out from
No, so
Blackmagic?
17K is unique. So the 12K full frame and 17K, they have the same sensor, just different size cut out of the 12-inch wafer again. But that's a unique sensor to Blackmagic, and that is, we believe, manufactured by Sony. There's, it's they don't have to say, but we believe, based on the technology we know, that's in the 12K Super 35 version. We believe all those sensors are made by Sony, with one exception, which is the Ursa Mini Pro 4.6 G2, which is
Yeah, I wonder what that puppy's going to rent for a day, because they just announced the pricing, $29,995 US, 30.
It's the only one you can buy, though.
So.
There's only two cameras in the world that can do that. So there's that and the Alexa 65. The Alexa 65, the rumor is there's only 9 of them in the world. They're not for sale, of course. You have to rent them. And you can't actually rent them. You can apply to rent them. So you have to fill out this long form about your production, all your insurance, everything about your production, and then Ari will come back and say yes or no, whether you're allowed to rent it. So it's not like you can, if it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you can't just go to Ari and say, I want the Alexa 65, for a week, because they'll go, no. we get to choose who gets to use this. So you take a look at the production that it gets used on. It does get used on indie films, but it's usually indie films who have an executive producer who has a pretty big name and an enormous amount of insurance, of course. So, and they have a track record. Sometimes production companies will do big films. So a good example of this, maybe J.J. Abrams' production company, Bad Robot. He does big films like Star Wars, but then he'll go off and maybe want to do an independent film, what he would consider an independent film. Now, even though that it's a smaller film, he can still garner Alexa 65 because it's Bad Robot, it's J.J. Abrams, and he's got the clout and he's got the money to replace it if they need to replace it. But I've heard there's as many Alexa 65s as there are IMAX cameras in the world. So there are 9 IMAX cameras in the world, and I've heard that there's the same amount of Alexa 65s. There's a couple in each continent for rent. So that's what I've heard anyway.
That's amazing. It doesn't matter how much money you have. That's what I heard.
Well, now you just buy the Blackmagic one, so.
Yeah, that's right. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Karen Addis in Melbourne, Australia. And they ask, when I do a Zoom workplace cloud recording, duration 2 hours, participants approximately 50, the size of the recording is about 5 gigs. If less participants, then the recording size is a lot less. Would it make any difference to size if they had their cameras off?
So it's an interesting one with the cloud recording. So it will depend also on whether you're looking at the gallery view recording, and if you're choosing to separate that. So you can choose in the cloud recording to have active speaker as a separate recording, and active speaker with or without shared screen, and then gallery view with or without shared screen. And so the gallery view would be dramatically different in size because of the compression that happens. And so yes, if no one had their cameras on, the gallery view would be interesting because it would still go to active speaker, and so then it would depend on the active speaker's frame and what was happening there, and if there was lots of movement, things like that. So it all depends on the compression there. Carl?
Yeah, so pretty much what you said. It depends on how you have it configured in your end as far as what you want to record. The other thing is depends on the meeting resolution. So if someone comes in from a phone, you go to 720, there's half your data rate gone. So it's always 25 frames a second for the recording, so that won't change. But it could be at a 360 meeting, you could be at a 720 meeting, you can be at a 1080 meeting. So there's a lot of variables in there. But 2 hours at 5 gig, that seems about right for compressed video. So if I'm thinking about, if you got maybe 2 streams going. So if you got like gallery view and active speaker, that sounds about right.
It's interesting. I've never thought about like a meeting at 360, whether the gallery view recording is still at 360 or if that is at 1080.
We need to test it.
Yeah, I don't have a 360 account to test. That's my flex, everyone.
I don't have a pro account, so I'll start the meeting as host.
I've got access to 3 different accounts and they're all at 1080. That's my nerd card. My Zoom nerd card just came out.
Go,
Ryan.
Sorry. So it's going to Carl, you mentioned 25 frames for the recording. Is the Zoom native 25 as well, or does it just push whatever's being sent?
No, Zoom's 30 as far as what we're seeing right now. But the recording is 25. They just drop one in every, I guess 6 frames.
Okay. Good to know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in addition to all that, it depends also. There's a little checkbox if you bust up the files to say that you're going to edit them. There's a difference there. I'm not sure what the file size hit is, but there is a difference. I think it might even be the temporal compression or some way that it's storing those, because it's doing something with either iframe. I think it's adding more iframes is what it's doing. And then the other thing that I do, so I record our church services for people that want to listen in the car and whatnot. So I just share them a audio version. So even though there's a video and audio version, I just share the audio only link, and then that way they can just hit download and they can have that locally, or it's very lightweight for them to store it if they want to keep that for archive purposes. So don't forget that if the video doesn't matter, don't send it to them. Just so you'll see video, but you'll also see share audio only.
And could you fit that on a CD, Guy?
MP3, or are we talking 74-minute?
74 minutes. It depends on how the sermon goes.
80 minutes, please.
It depends on how long the service goes for. Whether you can fit it all on one CD. It's a callback to where I when I learned audio, was sitting on my dad's knee. I was like 19. I was 7, 6 or 7, and I started learning how sound works. And we were recording onto cassette, and so then it was like, working out the length of cassettes and making sure it was all ready. And then, sometimes you might have to flip sides and things like that, and use both sides. Oh, what do you got there? Oh,
how about this? You remember we had to pull out the what do they call it? The notch to flip the floppy and use both sides of it, so you could notch it and get a little more out of it.
It's 5 1/4 for those playing at home.
5 1/4. That's right. Why do you have a 5 1/4 inch drive sitting at your feet?
There was a episode.
That's impressive, Ryan.
Ryan just pulled up
across the globe. If your powers could combine, both of you,
would just use a VPN to connect the two. Surely that's how we do it these days.
That's right. You could probably text message the amount of data that's on that floppy.
Wow.
Is it a high density
from the past?
High density floppy, that one, Ryan?
I think those are.
They only did 3.5.
It's
360K.
Yeah.
360K or 1.2 meg.
1.2 meg, yeah.
Yeah. Or
I don't know where it came from, but it's just been sitting there.
I need that. Can you?
That is amazing. That's amazing. All right. Did we cover that one off? Yes. Great. Next question.
Next one's in from Vienna, and she's in Australia, and she asks, it feels like I blinked and there's a new iPhone that's been released. What are the new and most exciting features of the iPhone 16 camera or any part of the hardware? How would you sell it to a layman?
Ryan?
So I've got mine now. So I upgraded from the 12 Pro. So it's been a couple of, so it was a bit of an upgrade for me. I'm not going to lie. It didn't feel big. Like, yes, it's a nicer phone. The camera's better. Like there's a lot of better stuff about it, but I wasn't blown away of like, oh, it's been 4 years. I've got like the new shiny thing. Again, it's still great. And I'm glad I did. The main reasons I got them personally was, I mean, the battery was starting to, get a bit annoying on the old one. I'm like, I don't want to pay to get this replaced and stuff. Like, and obviously using the camera a lot for work and chasing my daughter around, all that kind of stuff. So it's nice to have. Actually, having the button, I'm still getting used to, but having that button there has been nice to just have a button just to bring up the camera, and also just the flashlight. Having the now it's not actually letting me do anything. Trying to do live
in
demo.
camera, yeah,
and you can just hold the hold down the button and the light will come on. So those are nice little features. But ultimately,
not
the
life
Apple
changing.
Intelligence is no. Well, it's interesting to see what happens in 3-4 months when Apple Intelligence fully rolls out. I am excited to see what they do with terms of using the data on board and being able to say, "Hey, someone sent me something about something a while ago," and have it grab that data, because so often you're going, someone sent me something and I need to figure out what that is, and it actually being able to kind of work around that and use the data that you've got is great. So haven't got the beta yet because it's not available in Australia, but I'm looking forward to playing with it for sure.
Yeah, I think the that the summaries of emails could be really handy, rather than just seeing the first 2 lines of the email or the first line. Seeing a summary of that could be really cool, particularly if it just picks up that this is a spam, like this is it's not a real, real email or whatever. I got the 16.2, and I'm kind of on the 2-year upgrade cycle. I saw a video guy talking about, are we seriously going to be buying phones for the rest of our lives? Like, are we just going to be every 2 years, every 2-3 years, we buy another phone? It's like, yep, here I am on the iPhone 54. I had to wait because I had the 50, and now I got the 50. It's like, it's just thousands of dollars that we keep spending on things that are incrementally better. And that's what I've found. Like, the biggest difference for me is that I haven't got a case on this one yet, and so that feels different. But the big thing for me was, because I didn't have a 15, is doing spatial video, and playing around, particularly with the Vision Pro, is playing around with live streaming spatial video. And so that's all kind of exciting, playing around with that idea, and seeing some spatial photos as well in the Vision Pro is really cool. So I'm actually wanting to see if we can do one of these shows in spatial. So I'm kind of wanting to talk to Marcelo about switching in Stream Voodoo, like how we can switch between different streams of spatial video. So anyway, there's a challenge for us. Carl, did you have a take on the 16?
So, like Ryan, I'm currently on the 12 Pro Max. I looked at the 16, and the things that I'm interested in are the Apple Intelligence, and here in Australia, we're not going to get anything for the Apple Intelligence until like the 17 comes out. So I've and I looked at the cameras. So, but as a photographer, I've got a problem. So if I want to take a decent shot, I'm going to use a decent camera, or a camera with a larger sensor, bigger lenses, non-plastic lenses. But there is kind of an interesting thing. So I mentioned a little while ago about, before the phones were announced, that if they were going to put a 48 megapixel sensor into the ultra wide to help with 4K per eye for spatial, they've gone and done that. But the lenses for it, so the lens for the ultra wide, which is I believe, a 2.2 f2.2, and the sensor itself is relatively small. It's not as small as the 5x telephoto, but it's 3 times smaller than the Fusion camera, they call it now. So the Fusion camera is 3 times larger in area than the sensor inside the ultra wide, and then the sensor inside the tele, so the 5x one, is probably about 5 times smaller, 4.5, 5 times smaller than the Fusion camera. So it's really tiny. That's how they get the 120. But anyway, when you have 48 megapixels on a sensor that small in the ultra wide, you need like an f-stop of like f-stop 1 to actually get 48 megapixels because of diffraction limitation. And a lot of people said this when the original 48 megapixel went into like the DJI drones, and again the iPhone and the Samsungs, they all got the 48 megapixel quad pixel based sensor. So the interesting thing is that particular camera lens scenario actually maxes out at 12. So, but this is only if you're talking raw photography. If you're not talking computational, if you're not talking multiple exposures, like, Apple have this kind of image stack that when you hit the button, 20 things happen when you take a photograph. And that actually allows you, but there have been tests done that, that phones out in the wild now of the ultra wide, just landscape shots. And they're saying that it's definitely not as sharp as the Fusion camera. And that's to be expected. It has a sensor 3 times smaller, but it's mainly because of the f-stop. So the f-stop in the Fusion camera is 1.8 or 1.78. Let's call it 1.8. And because of that, it actually gets down to around 42 megapixel just natively. So if you had a raw file, it'd be 42 megapixel. Once you put in Apple's, IPS Magic, it easily gets to 48. You get the sharpness of a 48. Now, will it match a 48 megapixel from like a Sony or a Canon? Probably not. But again, they're using glass lenses, where the iPhone's using plastic lenses. So for what you're getting, it's quite amazing. The sensor is quite large. It's about 2/3, or is it 1.3 type sensor. So it's 2/3 type sensor. This goes up from like the iPhone 5 back in the day, had an absolutely tiny sensor. I believe the iPhone 5 sensor is the same size as the sensor now that's in the telephoto camera. So if you want to think about that, the front-facing camera doesn't change much. So that's the selfie camera, that doesn't really change, and that's got to do with physics of what can be done with, because there's no bulge on the front for the lens. If you actually measure the bulge from probably the iPhone 6, I believe that's where it started, and if you actually measure how the difference between the ratio between the bulge versus the rest of the phone, it's humongous now on a 16. Yeah, it's humongous compared to the rest of the phone. It's almost like it's getting close to 100%. Well, it would be on the iPad. But so the bulge is so large, and that's what enables them to fit in a 1.3 type sensor in there. It's a really large sensor. That's a sensor that's that's in a Pro, essentially the same size sensor that's in Pro broadcast cameras for their 3-chip sensors. The other thing about the iPhone, as far as why I'm choosing not to upgrade to the 16, but I definitely will be going to the 17 next year, is the Apple Intelligence. As I said, we're not going to see it in Australia out of beta until the 17 comes out anyway. So all the features that will become available to the 16 when it becomes available, I would get them and I'll wait a year to turn them on. I'd rather get the newer phone with improved put your list of things here, then get one now, and maybe for 1 month I'll be able to use it in beta mode and then get the new phone anyway. So I'm choosing myself not to, not because it's a bad phone. I think it's because I'm coming from a 12 Pro. It's going to be a big leap, but for me, the camera features, I have other cameras that do that, and the 12 is actually no slouch when it comes to like 12 megapixel photography, to be honest. It just doesn't have the 48. It doesn't have ProRes. Again, I'm not doing video on mine, so I mainly look at photography features. But the other features that are in the OS are interesting, and I have them available to me now. So photos, for instance. So the big update to photos I get already with just the 12. So for me, the things that matter, and I'm not glued to my phone all day. It's one of those things where I charge my battery. Some people find it's funny, but I charge my battery once every 2 to 3 days. I think, how can you do that on a 12? It's because I never touch my phone. I never really touch it because I'm usually sitting on a computer editing photos for someone else. So that's usually why. So I don't really sit on my phone and do other things. And if I get a message and I'm editing on my computer, I'm going to answer that message. I'm going to action that notification on my Mac rather than on my phone. But that's just me. But I do think the 16 is a very good step in the right direction as far as getting the hardware ready for Apple Intelligence. So we haven't seen this. They've talked about it, like the 15 can do it and the 16 can do it, and spatial again. So 15, 16 with spatial. There are a lot of things that are hardware limited, and I think that's actually a really cool feature that's in the 16 will be the spatial stuff that's going to link up. Now, I don't own a Vision Pro, so again, that's another reason why I haven't upgraded. But if I do own a Vision Pro, I know if I owned a Vision Pro, I'd definitely be on the 15 or 16. So that'd be a no-brainer for me. So, and this is coming from someone who used to buy an iPhone every year. So I used to be one of those people that bought an iPhone every year. Once the iPhone's got to like $2,000, I kind of slowed down on doing that.
Yeah, there was a big jump.
So they went from like $600.
Well, and for many years too, like you could get them on the subsidized plans, know, and so it was no real big deal. Maybe you paid $100 and then you just kept paying your monthly plan anyway, so you might as well get one new every year, or the 2-year plan. Now we're just buying them outright. It seems like, but that changed a lot.
With Apple Care.
All right. Guy?
Yeah, for me, the big thing is that USB-C port. I'm still on the 14, and I was going to get a 15, and I might just pick up a used 15 now because I was shooting some training videos, and I was just looking at the file size of this, and to transfer this is only a minute 41, and it's 12 gigabytes, 11.39 gigs for a 3840 by 2160 ProRes file. So, I mean, that's a monster file to try and transfer over Bluetooth or, over a lightning cable.
Yeah, USB
so
2.
being able to shoot directly to a USB-C disk is a big deal for me, because it's either that or go buy or rent cameras. And for these short little training videos, it doesn't really make sense for me to go buy an FX6. I mean, as much as I want one, but then I want two. And so that's the other thing, is I'm using Blackmagic's camera app. So I'm able to cut between two. For the close-ups, I'm using an iPad, and then I'm using another iPad to actually do the switching. So I could use 3 devices. So this is the thing, is do you want to drop all your money on one device, or do you want to have multiples? Because I use the heck out of my 12.9 iPad. So there's so many times where I'm just like, okay, this is going to be a longer email. Like, ditch the phone, give me the iPad so I can type fast, So there's a lot of times where I'm having to bounce out of the iPhone just because you need to dig in. So I don't know if I would buy the 16 for $2,000 at this moment if I had the choice of getting an older iPad 12.9, because they're just so useful. They're so incredibly useful, especially with the keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's valid. I'm nearly rid my life of Lightning, which is quite exciting, because now I've got the iPods Pro with USB-C now, and everything else is USB-C, and so I'm quite excited about that. TV remote. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, mouse. Yeah, exactly. We still some things that are around, but the thing that I've still got I've got an older car, and I've got the aux cable in it. I did this hack for it that goes to RCA. So it's actually 30 pin. It's a 30 pin connector to RCA and USB power, right? And so then I have a 30 pin to Lightning adapter on that, and it works a treat. It's been working fine on my 14, and everything else works great. So now I've got the decision to make. Do I get a C to Lightning adapter to go to Lightning to 30 pin to RCA to make that work?
Or you just get a new car.
That's what I should do.
But I don't know. If you keep that set, it's pretty cool. Someone can jump in with a 30 pin iPod and off they go.
Right. It'd be fine. That'd still be fine. This will work. Yeah, it's hidden away. It looks like it's Lightning, but it's the 30 pin adapter is hidden into the dash. But maybe I'll just go to the Bluetooth and see how it goes. But I'll keep you posted on that. I'm sure you're all worried about what I'm going to do in my old car. All right, next question.
Next one in from Eduardo Augustine in Panama City, Panama. And he says, had to replace my fiber HDMI cables a 3rd time now. Should I go SDI or wireless with Teradek or some similar tools? I treat my fiber HDMI with care, but these are just fragile and pricey. I'm doing sports like football, got an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO.
Ryan?
Yeah, so look, when it comes to HDMI, I treat them as consumables. It's like right next to the gaffer tape in the drawer. It's kind of like you just keep throwing, like it's one-time use almost. And even if you look after them as much as you want, they're still going to die at some point. So I would highly recommend converting to SDI, because those things are robust. You can field terminate them if you've got the kits. That's definitely the way I'd go. You could go wireless but I only go wireless if you actually need to. If you're going to be on the field and you're going to have trip hazards, etc. But SDI, that'll give you 100 meters, 300 foot. You'll be laughing.
Nice. Carl?
Yeah, just as Ryan said. So just Blackmagic microconverters, 3G, 12G, whichever one you need, and just convert it from HDMI to SDI, add the tripod, then run, as you said, 100 meters you can run up to, and then you can go SDI into an SDI Extreme, of course, ATEM Extreme, whatever you're using, so you can keep it SDI. So you can change your workflow if you upgrade, or if you can just switch it back over to HDMI. So for that, at the other end, it's sometimes better to use a bidirectional, because bidirectional allows you to do other things as well at the far end. So, but you can use a micro, SDI to HDMI, or a bidirectional, which will it does a few things. The bidirectional, it has a LUT box and all that kind of stuff on it too. Well, actually, so does the HDMI to SDI, to be honest. So, but yeah, SDI is the way you want to go. Yeah, unless you're going, unless you've got a camera on the field. But even if you've got a camera on the field and you've got, but yeah, SDI is, if you're going long distances, avoid optical unless you're going over 100 meters, and then you want to go fiber. You want to go actual fiber. So, which is again just another box from Blackmagic or whoever, and just convert it to fiber, and you can go over 100 meters.
Yeah, it feels to me like two separate things. The idea of going wireless, and then HDMI versus SDI. As we're saying, go SDI, yes, and then if you want to do wireless, that's a separate thing, and you can play around with that. But I think that the fiber HDMI cables are very cool, but are very fragile, and so I think they're great for installs and for things that you're just going to set and forget. But for things that you're using, and it sounds like if you're going to football or something, you're doing that all the time, packing up, setting up, packing up. It's not going to take much and they'll wear those out. So SDI is designed for that, and you can, because of course you can get all sorts of different cables as well for SDI. So that'll be the way to go. Next question.
Oh, I was just going to jump in. Sorry, just the SDI, the BiDi converters, the Blackmagic ones. Just be careful with those, because there's still a bug in them where if you have HDMI going in, for example, and you're doing loop in, loop out, if you turn off, like if the camera turns off, for example, on that HDMI input, it will then go into loop mode and it will send the return feed the wrong way. Like you'll have some funniness. So I typically go for the Decimator LX because you can force it into whatever mode you want. I don't know why they haven't fixed this yet, because that's the main thing for me, but just a little gotcha.
Yeah, so I've been down that rabbit hole, and it gets more. There's a fork in that road as well, and that is that some computers don't like the Blackmagic or the Decimators. So I've had to have a combination of where there's some Macs that just won't work with the Decimator. I have to use the Blackmagic.
Make sure high DPI is off. So this is where you need to use SwitchResX. You need to force your Mac. So Mac will always do high DPI, even on its outputs and everything. So you need to force if it can see it. So this is a problem, because a lot of Blackmagic stuff can do 4K with HDMI. It'll just go, okay, here's 1080p high DPI, which is a format it just doesn't understand. So you have to use SwitchResX. So if you're using computer in production, install SwitchResX. That's what I'm trying to say. And then force it to the 1080p you need, and make sure it's not the HDMI version. Make sure it's not the high DPI version that's going out of HDMI. So it's a gotcha for a lot of things, and you can actually get better length. So this is another thing about Apple HDMI connections. You can get better distance. So I've got some 30-meter copper HDMI cables, and I can get better if I put my SwitchResX into 1080p 30. I can easily run it 30 meters on copper. If I put it 1080p 60, can't do it. So because of SwitchResX, I can go in there and just say, okay, make this external display be 1080p 30 down this HDMI cable, and I have no problem. So SwitchResX can not only lock you into a right format, it can actually give you a more robust format that can go further lengths in much longer HDMI cables. Now, I suggest not going over 10 meters in HDMI copper cable. And if you're going to go over 10 meters, just go SDI, I guess. But I do have some specialty crazy cables that kind of were designed for installs into projectors. But yeah, I've noticed that with SwitchResX, you want that on any Mac that's going to go into production and actually going to have a signal going out, because you need to really lock in exactly what it is, because you do not want the client device, the device you're sending it to choose with an EDID. You don't want that to happen. So that's where SwitchResX is really powerful if you're in production with Macs or essentially Macs, or if you there is another way, which is if you've got a Mac that can have a Sonnet box, yada yada, then you go add SDI. But this is essentially with the HDMI that is built into the Mac. Yeah, on SwitchResX.
So Carl, I've been to your house. I don't know where you could fit a 30-meter cable. You could probably wrap your house with it, 30 meters. Is that right?
So this was a job that I did that involved you. Actually, I was the only one there, but
that's right.
Involved
yes.
you. Yeah. Yes. So, and I had to figure out a solution for this, and so I just went downstairs across the street I knew this store would have them. It's probably the only place, and bought it. And yeah, I was running it. I was going, okay, 1080 60 didn't work, and I went, okay, let me try 1080 30. 1080 30 worked like a treat. So putting it lower data rate, it will make it through the copper for the HDMI chipset at the other end in like the television or display, or whatever. It'll get that signal, because remember, it's just a square wave signal. It's an analog signal going through the cable, even though it's digital information. The signal itself is analog and it's a square wave. And so as long as the lows and the highs of the square wave are enough for that chipset at the other end to go, oh, I know what this is, then not a problem. So I found with 60, it was just too much noise. The signal to noise ratio was too high. Going down to 30, or you can go down to 24, but he's going to do that. So going down to 30 worked fine. You can go down to 25, I guess, if you want to go to 25. But if your system rate is 60, there's no problem going down to 30 and let Apple just drop every second frame just to make sure you get that signal through. But this was a solution I have, and these cables are good. I bought them and I went, yeah, that's fine. I don't know if I'd ever need to use them again, but I've got them.
So Ryan, I feel your pain. I'm sure you've looked at a multi-view before, and you're staring at that input and thinking, why is that showing that input? It's like, or you see a whole bunch of all your inputs all change, and now you're like, is that my multi-view that I've set up that way? Is it the route that I've done? Is it through a matrix switch that I've done that change? Never do you think, it was just the HDMI SDI converter that's now looping out.
Went to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Computer went to sleep. Nothing's wrong. It's just that now all my inputs have changed because it's looping through.
And they have to repower the thing and get someone running out there. Yep. It's been fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's nice to lock them down. Never loop, please. All right, next question.
Next one in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and he asks, what can you do with the old lightning cables? Apple's finally killing off its proprietary lightning charging cord for new iPhones and replacing it with the universal standard USB-C.
You can give it to me. I can use it in my car, but I need some 30-pin adapters as well. Carl?
So as I mentioned before, it is still a charging interface for a lot of Apple products. So you want to spear the tortoise as we charge the mouse. Those kind of things. So Apple TV remote, of course, is another one. I don't think it's going to go away because there's still going to be a lot of products in the secondhand market. So like 14 and back is still Lightning. So you still have a lot of people who have 14s, and I think with Blackmagic's camera app and now the iPad, which allows you to do remote to multiple cameras, as Guy was talking about, I think 14s, 13s, 12s, I think 12s is what lowest you want to go. Those are now, if you have them in your collection or you can get them cheap on eBay, you can now do some multicam stuff with these cameras in the Blackmagic app, and so you will need Lightning to charge these things. So we still live in a Lightning world. It may be 5 or 10 years before those Lightning phones become obsolete, where they won't run like the current version of whatever Blackmagic app they have out at the time, or whichever company popped up in the future with apps.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Next one in from Tim Mann, and he asks, what is your view on comms for audio operator in live theater?
Yeah, sorry, I was clicking buttons. So I've seen just recently, and I didn't see who else raised their hand, but I would recommend that the Shocks OpenComm as so bone conduction, you can connect to the Bolero. It depends on what brand of comms you're using. The two biggest ones are Riedel and Clearcom, and the Clearcom wireless packs have just gone to Bluetooth receivers now as well, and so you get the upgrade on that. Then you can connect to a bone conduction Bluetooth headphones, and now the audio operators' ears are open, and they can hear also. Now, it doesn't work in a loud environment very well. As soon as it gets quite loud, it is a little hard to hear. You can put your finger in your ear and you actually can hear it really well when you do that. And so, but I do wonder if a combination of that and the different types of bone conduction headsets would be the ideal. Even if it's not using it for the microphone and it's just listening to the comms, and when there's a question being asked or whatever, often the audio operator doesn't need to speak, right? Very often for shows, and if they need to communicate, a thumbs up or a shake of the head is all that's needed. And so I think that would work really well, and it is good. It is good having been in that situation, running audio a lot in corporate environment. It really is annoying to wear a headset just to hear some chatter or a couple of cues that happen here or there. Sometimes those cues can be elsewhere. You don't actually need to listen to comms. So that's where the bone conduction, I think, is good. Did anyone else have anything on that?
Yeah, I was a few other options as well is you can get like old telephone handsets, which you can plug into your comms and then have like a call light on top of your console so that whenever you need to get their attention, they can just grab the phone and be like, yeah, cool. And it's literally just a earpiece and go into your 4 or 5 pin, depending on your comms. But that's nice because it's not on you. You can just grab it quickly to hear something. Or even better, having an audio assist who can actually tap on your shoulder and be like, there's someone coming on stage, you might want to turn the mic on.
Yep. Yeah, I've totally seen that as well. You get a bigger show and you just have an audio assistant on comms, on full comms, and then just does relays anything that's important or whatever. Gives them the cues and away it goes. Yeah. Cool. Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany asks, which new products, if any, do you expect from the upcoming event, Rode Revolutionizing Content Creation?
Carl?
I don't know if we're going to have any new kind of product categories. I think we're going to get updates to their current lineup. Hopefully we do, because the good thing that's happening in this space and also in LED lighting space is we have like 2 or 3, well, probably about, in this space, probably have 3 or 4 companies really pushing each other in a competitive space. So a feature set, so essentially they're all copying each other, but they're all maybe 6 months out of sync, 12 months out of sync. So that doesn't really matter in the long run, but they're all pushing each other to get the right features for the right job. And they're actually making different SKUs as well. So they're actually making products at the higher end. So I think Rode has got probably TC Helicon, which is part of the Music Tribe family. So if you look at their offerings, Rode is pretty much in there. Godox is pushing very hard into this. So I think Rode and Godox are almost in lockstep at the moment. So Godox has enormous offering in the audio space right now. They don't have mixers though. So there's stuff that there's a Venn diagram of the cover, and this is where they don't fully overlap. And this is also probably true with TC Helicon. They don't fully overlap. So the kind of good thing is that, and this is true in lighting. So lighting with like Aperture, Nanlite, and Godox themselves, they don't fully overlap either. But it's really cool where they do overlap. They're pushing each other really hard. And we're seeing like this iteration, really fast iteration, like recording in body packs. So that's something that was almost non-existent 2 or 3 years ago. And now pretty much everyone who makes a body pack that transmits now doing recording in the body pack. They're all doing it. They're all doing it pretty much the same quality, but so these things are really cool. And it really doesn't matter which brand you buy. If you're buying a current brand, and like if you upgrade and if you want to play around with them, you can actually afford one of each kind of to see what works, and then sell off the one you choose not to fit in your production. But because they're all pushing each other, innovation's going pretty fast. Which is really cool to see in this space. So whatever they release is really good, because I know that, Music Tribe on one side and Godox on the other side, and maybe even Roland, if they want to come down. Roland does have a lower end space in these audio mixers too. They all push each other it's more of a feature set. So it's more of a, how will this tool work, rather than, what is actually, what is the actual hardware? What color do the lights turn? That kind of stuff we've kind of moved past, I hope. But as far as like feature sets and how they communicate with each other, that's where it's kind of getting exciting, because we don't see these other things for TC Helicon and Godox. They don't do these events, whereas Rode like to try to be an Australian company. They just choose to, because like Blackmagic does as well. They like to have these announcements, but they just kind of drop everything at once. But hopefully they do open up a new space. So if they go into a new category of market that they're not currently in, that'll be good. Because it'll force the other companies that don't have any competition in, because essentially let's say it's something that only TC Helicon does at the moment, or something only Godox does at the moment. If they go into the same market, then we've got 2 doing it, maybe 3, and they're going to push each other in that market. So every time that we get overlap in these markets from these companies, innovation just goes rapid pace. It's really good how this is working.
Ryan?
It's an interesting one because looking at the announcement, that looks somewhat familiar to a little switcher. Just saying. So we'll be very interested to see what happens in 13 hours time.
Well, it will be. All right, next question.
Next one's coming in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and he asks, "What's the future of Stream Deck? Are you satisfied with it?"
Carl?
So the interesting thing with Stream Deck is it's essentially the video feature. So the fact that the keys you can change what's on the keys, that is probably its biggest feature. Everything else that it does is pretty much just a shortcut generator. So essentially it's just a keyboard shortcut or a MIDI command. So all those things can be done with other devices, but the fact that you can see the change of state for each of the buttons, so you can go through your pages. That's actually its biggest feature. What I'd like to see is more of something that was done, is more controlled. Now they've done this with the dials, so they're rotary encoders. So these rotary encoders, but for the rotary encoders to have a state as well. So this is kind of something you'd be going off into like a mixing console with a digital scribble strip. So that's kind of where I'm looking at now. There are devices out there that do this. They're much more expensive, much more bespoke. But if they go into that area where they actually have a digital scribble strip, a touch screen, which was what was the top bar in the Mac called that they got rid of eventually. So something like that, touch bar. So if they actually introduce a touch bar with rotaries above it, so essentially it will tell you what the touch bar is, but if you click it, you can. So essentially, it's a button and a rotary, and so I think that's where they will go because the fact they started doing rotaries says they may look in that direction, but it is quite expensive to implement.
The Plus does have that, doesn't it?
The Plus has the rotaries, yeah.
It also has a little strip underneath that says what it does.
But it's not a touch version, so you can't use that as a button. You can't touch it and then use the dial above it to change that setting. So let's say the reason, so that's so you can change setting because you have to go into software. I believe right now, or change page. You have to go on software to change it, or change pages to a predetermined software. So at the moment, you can't change it. There are controllers out there which are more MIDI-based controllers, or what's called a HUD controller. This is for higher end stuff like Pro Tools that you can do this stuff for, and it's for like rapid editing and Pro Tools and stuff. If you can buy Pro Tools' own surfaces, and Avid has their own surfaces as well, of course. But there are. So if you take a look at like the high end Avid stuff, some of those features from high end Avid, what they use for Pro Tools, I'd love to see, and Media Composer, I'd love to see that come into that feature base, but it'd be expensive. It's just how much do you want to pay for a controller that doesn't actually do anything?
And that's the thing that Elgato has found that sweet spot, I think, with their pricing, and they're just ubiquitous now. But Guy?
Yeah, I'm hoping that they'll stick a computer in there. Somebody did a teardown, and inside there's actually enough space right there to drop a little single board computer so you could run Companion or buttons just locally on that and not have to worry about having an extra machine in case the power goes out or something on that rack of that machine, and now you lose control of your system. So it'd be nice to have everything.
Buttons does that or doesn't? I thought Buttons ran locally on it.
No, Buttons is still software on another machine. So it's you go to the Companion website or the Bitfocus website and you download it. And right now it's a trial version, so you can play with it. But eventually, if you want to unlock it fully, you have to pay the subscription fee. And then so the future of it, with the NFC stuff, I think that's super powerful. A lot of people don't realize that with this little key, you'll be able to walk up and the interface will change. Basically, if you're an audio op and you need access to admin of certain Dante routing or something, you don't want anybody else at your facility messing with that. That person has that NFC key, whereas normally the mode, the state that would live in would be, for somebody just to hit record and stream. It just has like basic buttons, basic functionality. So I think that's really the future, is looking at these things differently as to not only where they live, but how you can not have to have a whole other computer to take over a certain part of a show, because you can just walk up with your NFC chip and boom, you could actually cut a show now from a rack or plug in a Stream Deck. Because that's the other cool thing, is this one does have a little USB-C port on the front to drop in an XL. Yeah, so you can put that on your desk and still not have to reach up to the rack or physically get up, because if you're in show mode, a lot of times you don't want to move. You just want to be able to have access to those controls local, more at finger's touch.
I'm just interested. It just feels like it's the first product of the collaboration. I really love the fact that Bitfocus, I think with Companion, have cornered the market on like this open source modules for any sort of production equipment you can think of, and then Elgato is the de facto control surface of choice, as much as there's other things that you can use. So the fact that they're collaborating on pro versions of this is really interesting. And so I think where it goes to from here, I'm super interested to see what happens. And really, is a broadcast going to jump at this? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how successful this product will be, but it could be a slight pivot to the people that are already using Stream Decks to be able to use that less so for buttons and more so for, I mean, for a paid version. How many of us would just be very happy to pay for a Companion, and my thinking on that is I'm like, I pay a couple $100 a year or whatever, and it's just done. I don't want a monthly subscription. I'm like, give me that. And now it supports that whole company and they push updates quicker and things like that. Anyway, that's just my thinking on that. But it's an exciting collaboration. So we'll see what happens. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Ryan Summerfield in Sydney, and he asks, any recommendations for a VST host for live plugins on M1 Max to be able to pipe into Zoom? Bonus points for being free.
Carl, another nerd card, actually, kind of in the audio space.
Yeah. So Audio Hijack will do AU plugins, which is M1, working on any of the M processors, and Sound Source. So these are both from Rogue Amoeba. No, they're not free. You can do a bit of if you've already got Rogue Amoeba stuff, even Loopback, you could use in and out of GarageBand. Now that's free, and you can just have the output of GarageBand go into Loopback and Loopback into Zoom. I wouldn't suggest doing that, but it's no problem doing this. You're using Core Audio anyway, so it's not going to be a problem. But Audio Hijack and Sound Source, both from Rogue Amoeba, facilitate using AU plugins, which is the VST plugins. So, but again, they're not free, so that's the only thing. Free again, you'd need something that would plug in. So you would need Loopback in there. So pretty much Loopback is kind of a key to do this. If you're not using Loopback, then Audio Hijack.
Have you not got those yet, Ryan? Loopback and Audio Hijack?
I haven't actually looked at Audio Hijack and Sound Source. I am using Loopback now, so that's been great.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting thought about going through GarageBand or
GarageBand into
MainStage.
So MainStage will do it. So you essentially any of the Apple Logic if you've got that. So if you go in and out, so you just point Loopback at the output, so you send your output to Loopback and Loopback to Zoom. So Loopback is going to be the hand holding between like a DAW. If you don't want to use a DAW and you just want to chuck the plugin, the AU plugin in, then Audio Hijack or Soundstage, Sound Source.
Yeah,
right.
Audio Hijack will. Yeah, that's the thing, is that it'll take the plugins direct. You can just plug them straight in the way it goes.
And you can point Audio Hijack at Zoom. So
yeah,
one app only.
Mm-hmm. I use Audio Hijack all the time for recording Zoom calls. I just want to record the audio and I can schedule it and it just records and then it saves it to a Dropbox and works really well. There's lots of things and for using meters as well, like when we're talking about bringing up meters for like it's just a really easy way to use a plugin and bring up the Waves plugin and there it is. So see, this is an example of when you bought Loopback, there was an option to buy the bundle and you chose to be cheap, and instead you could have done Cry Once, Buy Once, Cry Once, and you would have had both of them and you would have been playing with Hijack this whole time.
I did buy it a long time ago. I don't know which one came out first, but yeah.
Fair enough. All right, next question.
I feel so called out right now. All right. Eduardo Augustine in Panama City. What are your thoughts about BMD Instant Replay option? I've been using vMix Replay, and what amazed me the most was the replay editor controller from BMD, kind of like their wheels.
Ryan?
Yeah, I haven't actually like done it in some sort of live setting yet. For me, it looks very much like if you've got someone doing like social media highlights, for example, on an event and being able to pull in your ISO feeds and just do a live cut, it looks awesome. I mean, I'm a big fan of EBS because they just work and they're just solid, as well as having operators actually know how to operate that as well. Because that's the biggest issue we've found is, sure, you've got, vMix, you've got the NewTek 3Play and all these different things, which on paper do the job. But then you've got to find the people who actually know how to press the right buttons, because they're like, I'm just an EBS guy. That's just what I do. I don't know any of the other stuff. So I think that's going to be the biggest issue is being able to operate it. But it sounds like you're potentially doing it yourself. So definitely check it out and try and break it too, because it's the way that they're getting data into it is essentially going straight to a NAS and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how reliable that is. If you're using a Hyperdeck, definitely have one of the ones with a M.2 in there to have that buffer, because anything without an M.2 is just not going to work. But actually doing it from the like an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, for example, having 8 feeds and pulling it straight from that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, over a 1 gig connection. I know that is interesting to me. I like the fact that they made the change that you can have the multi-view out of the webcam output now, so you're sort of seeing that, so you can kind of be tagging as you go, or kind of creating in and out points even before you've got the actual data, which is interesting. And so I think the concept works. I think the concept works in general, but whether it really works in practice, the good thing, Eduardo, is that for you, I think you might be doing like sort of weekly shows. If you're doing you're doing sport and you're just getting lots of reps in, this is a perfect use case for it. And to Ryan's point, it's getting the right people. So it's one thing they have to have the technical knowledge. They generally also need to have the sport knowledge. They really need to understand the game and to understand the types of things that you're wanting to get out of it. And so I know, I was having my head around cricket for a while and working on that. And I'm not a big sports guy, surprise, surprise. But understanding the game and then understanding what a viewer would want to see in the replay, what's important, that's really key. And I would say is more important than the tech understanding. And so here's my recommendation. I would want a fan first and a tech second. Like they're a fan, 60% fan. They understand the game really well and they know what they would want to see first, and then they're going to teach themselves the tech and it'll make it work. If you try to do it around the other way, I don't think it'll work, and you'll get a tech who's doing more technical things and not serving the audience as well. And so when you have that different sort of mindset on an operator, which is why I've noticed all the broadcast guys, Ryan, like in the NEP trucks, all those EVS operators are super sporty people. Generally, that's my general observation. They understand the game, and so that's what they're more about than being super technical people. And they're not nerds. They don't have their nerd cards. They've got their sports cards in their pocket, and that's what I've noticed. At all. Pardon? Not technical at all.
Most are not technical at all. They just like they just know what buttons to press and stuff, and they just call to someone if something breaks.
Exactly.
But they're like, I know what shots I need now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's right. Where's the BE to come and fix this problem? Because I'm not touching the tech at all, but I know how to. And watching a really good EVS operator is a cool thing to do. Like, it's very impressive to see them. It's all that muscle memory. But what's driving that is not a technical knowledge; it's a game knowledge. And so that's my best recommendation. Teach a fan how to do it, and if they're doing it every week, and it's not something you've sold to the client or whatever, and it's just something that you throw in every now and again, you do a couple of replays here and there, and just ease your way into it and see how it performs. I've used the Extreme ISO to great effect. But I've also had it die on me, and I'm like, as in, I've also had failures of the drive. Is it the drive that's failed, or is it how the Extreme ISO works? I don't know, but if it's do or die type, you must have replays. I'm not sure I would put all my eggs in the Extreme ISO basket. So that's just my thoughts.
Have two of them.
You got two of them? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and two operators.
Well, sorry, like if you're going to do it, like have two systems. So if one dies, you can just swap to the other one. But
and that's Alex's thing with Blackmagic all the time, right? He's talked about the amazing thing with Blackmagic gear is I can buy two of them for the price that I would have to pay for other gear. So I can have a hot backup, or I can have a boxed one, ready to pull out if I need to, or things like that. So yeah. All right, last question.
Last one in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, and he asked, the Emmys were just held, and why is it that I really don't see most of the nominees, and they seem like the same ones as last year and the year before?
Carl?
So high-end shows, beget high-end shows, and then, so essentially, if you have a high-end show, I think Shogun is the only show this year that swept the Emmys. I believe it was a new show for this year. I believe it wasn't nominated last year because I believe it's a 2024 show. So this was its first Emmy season. So it kind of swept everything anyway. But you'll find that shows that have a long run, like The Crown or Stranger Things, it doesn't really matter. So once you go more than 2 or 3 seasons and it's a high quality show, they just attract themselves to these kind of things. It's no different than late night talk shows. The same late night talk shows get nominated every single year for the last 10 years. No one new is going to come in there. It's going to be the Jimmys, Stephen Colbert, and John Oliver got spit out because he kept on winning in the category. They gave him his own category, but they still don't win. So it's kind of interesting. But the Emmys is really like what's classified as like eligible for the Emmys. So YouTube shows are not yet classified. So even though YouTube is a streaming service, they stream. They have their own original content to meet the criteria. Some people are a little bit upset that certain YouTube shows can't even be nominated for short documentary, that kind of stuff. So it has to be, there's certain rules. So, but the Emmys is it's just an industry event for everyone to get together and give out awards. So it does help with careers of some people. It's good on the resume, I guess, and it helps with the executive producers to know which one to choose. But at the end of the day, the Emmys don't really matter as far as good content, as far as good storytelling. You don't need a humongous budget to do good storytelling, but the more money you throw at Star Wars, the better. I'm okay with that. But it's just the way it is with the Emmys, and it always has been. It's no different to the Oscars. It's pretty much everyone just celebrating the work they do and a reason for them to all get together and have a drink. So that's kind of what it is. But I do understand that we are in this kind of interesting time where the amount of shows at the top that have risen to the top, there aren't that many all at once, because the show creators usually go on to do something else. So a good example is Breaking Bad going into Better Call Saul. So you can't have both those shows at the same time. We can't have those quality shows because they're made by the same team. There is kind of overlap back in the old NBC days. So we had The Office, Parks and Recreation, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So those shows overlapped and they all had the same creators in them. But that's because these creators decided to have 2 shows going at once because NBC allowed it. So NBC was going to give them the money to do 2 shows at once. And they could handle that. Streaming services don't generally like that. They don't generally like giving creators 2 shows at once at the moment. So we're not seeing that. But the networks were okay with it because they're so formulaic. The networks were so formulaic and you had so many executive producers making sure everything was going smoothly. You could bounce between 2 shows. So that's kind of the reason why you see the same people nominated each year after year, is because the projects keep on rolling over and the same people roll over. It's not a bad thing. We're in a good period of storytelling. I think we're in a golden era of television storytelling. So it's kind of good.
I think at the start of the Emmys is when they said this is a TV broadcast awards show to hand out awards to streaming services. Which is true. I still enjoy watching those award shows, so I watched it and found it interesting. All right, content recommendations, people. I didn't remind you of that, so I wonder who has one ready. I was going to say to you, Carl, that if they keep making more Star Wars things, then you're going to need another bookshelf, right?
That's right. So the one over, so this side, that's essentially Star Wars.
That's
Most of
all
it's
just Star Wars.
non-fiction, yeah, non-fiction art books and stuff like that. And then some of the bottom part of this shelf is Star Wars, and then this side is all pretty much non-fiction, like textbooks and stuff.
So there's a Star Wars nerd card that he's got in his pocket.
Oh yeah,
Maybe a few of them.
I've had that since Return of the Jedi. So that's before
Very good.
Blockbuster existed.
So have you got a content recommendation, Carl?
So my content recommendation is going to be essentially there's a series that was put out. I think you can find them on YouTube now, but it was how to separate people from their money. So it was done by Dennis Hopper. It was a documentary series about advertising, and this will go into the Gruen. So anyone in Australia will understand the Gruen or Gruen transfer. So this is kind of a panel show that talks about advertising, and it's actually done on a channel that has no advertising. So our national broadcaster, the ABC here in Australia, doesn't have broadcasting at all. Doesn't have advertising on their channel at all. But they have a show all about advertising, which is kind of hilarious. This show's now been going for 15 years, I want to say. But there was a documentary series done in the late 90s called How to Separate People from Their Money with Dennis Hopper. I believe you can find it on YouTube. It's probably a 6-part series, and it's just a documentary about advertising and how advertising works, and it's spoken by advertising executives. So they stand in front of the camera and talk about it. And that's exactly what this panel show called the Gruen Transfer is, but it's a live panel show done in front of an audience with a bit of a comedic spin sometimes. But it does have essentially 4 advertising executives, and these are usually pretty high-powered advertising executives, especially in Australia and New Zealand, handling pretty big budget stuff. And they give you the insight, just a lowdown on how it's done. Now, this is interesting because our 2 massive supermarkets here in Australia have just been sued by our government. Because of incorrect kind of sales promotions, essentially advertising. So my suggestion would be Gruen, if you can get access to the Gruen or Gruen Transfer, so it's a panel show that goes for many years, you can log into ABC iView. If you just need a VPN to come to Australia, you can get into it with just an email. And look on YouTube for How to Separate People from Their Money, which is a documentary series presented by Dennis Hopper.
Very good. Ryan, what have you got?
I always struggle with this, but I'll do a shameless plug for my
Nice.
YouTube at the moment because
good.
only because I did a video a little bit back on some audio routing. So if you've got a Constellation, any of the Constellations now, or a TV8, you can actually do individual audio routing through all of your outputs. So it's super, like I'm using it all the time now. So being able to send, ISOs to your HyperDecks or a mix minus down your feed back to Zoom, for example. It's super powerful now, being able to just send what you want anywhere on an individual channel basis. So, yeah.
That's really cool. And I mean, there's not submixers yet, but there's at least routing though, right?
Exactly. We nice to have some submixers, but especially now we've got our Constellation going into a MADI to Dante converter, going into our X32, so we can send anything anywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah, that is cool. And the HyperDeck Studio can do 16 channels of recording too, right? So you could
any HyperDeck I think can do 16 channel. So yeah, you can send each port. You can adjust every pair of channels.
Yeah, it's so good.
So the HyperDeck 8K can do 64 channels.
You could record everything in ISO. That's cool. Nice one. People check out that YouTube channel of yours. And Guy?
Yeah, I didn't know we could do our own videos. I have one on the HyperDeck 8K. I'll just plug that one. There
you go.
No, I actually have I have one based on the cinematography group that I'm in. I forgot about this movie since when I was a little kid is when I watched it, but it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and they've got it now in 4K with a director's cut. And these shots, I mean, to go back and look at them with a different eye, it's pretty amazing. So I'll put a link to this in the chat with these 30 scenes to really just examine and look at and break them down. But it's one of those things where you just forget that even though this thing was made in 1977, that some of these visual elements and parts of history, you learn them in film school and whatnot, but to see them refreshed, not just what they look like on, I think I probably watched it on HBO or something, with the coax cable, coming through back in the early 80s. So it's a different experience to watch something now in 4K and be able to really stop and pause and analyze a scene, especially with the internet now and being able to get other people's opinions. So that's going to be my pick, is Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 4K.
Good one. Well done. Adrian.
Yeah, one that got sent to me this morning. Austin Mann's channel, and he's also got a website. He's done an iPhone 16 review in Kenya, which has got some absolutely breathtaking shots. Out the side of a chopper, doors off, hand holding the phone, and it's just, yeah, if you weren't told it was on an iPhone, you'd probably wonder what they shot it on. It's pretty good. I'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah, nice. Good one. Mine, I can't actually get the name of it. Was a new Netflix movie that just came up. Something Ridge. I'm sure I'll find it. This is worth it because I've spoken Rebel Ridge. I've spoken previously about asking ChatGPT about give me other movies like the 90s typical Rocky, and the like Predator, and like there's all these different ones that are just like very loose story, high action, often with a sort of Lone Ranger type, ex-military person, and that's exactly what this movie is, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It's slightly B grade, but I still really enjoyed Rebel Ridge on Netflix, just as a typical payback, dirty cops, payback to the dirty cops in a small town. There you go. You've got the whole storyline now, and spoiler alert, basically. I mean, that doesn't matter. You know what's going to happen from the start of the movie. So enjoy that. Well, thank you, everyone. We've gone over the CD in length. Sorry about that. If you were going to burn it off, you can blame Carl for
that's
pulling
right.
out
DVD
all
audio exists. That's fine.
DVD audio. Yeah. You could also speed it up a little bit just to fit it into the 74 minutes. So, thank you, Taylor, for switching the buttons, making all that work. And look at that, he's even switched himself in. Well done. And if you are interested in helping out and playing around with the back end of this show, you can contact Taylor, and also there's a link that we'll put in the chat to sort of sign up to get involved in that. We'd love for you to be able to play around with Vector, and if you've got your own system, like a vMix or a Ecamm or any number of these sort of software systems that you would like to join into this Zoom call, then we're open to that as well. And you could sort of have a play around and switch the show live using this content. So that's the idea of it too. Great. Thanks everyone. Thanks to the panel. It was a good chat. It was good. The mice while the cat was away, had a good little chat. And it's good to have the Aussie accent strong in the recording as well. All right. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.